Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply. This video is to bring you a closer look at the AccurateLH. This is their part number, well, it's their part number FE158-1. This is what's called an edge pole, maybe a knife pole is what I've heard it called. It is a type of edge pole, there's no doubt. There would be certainly different products that would be qualified to be called edge poles. I have heard this called a knife pole, where other poles are really not considered a knife pole like this. A very elegant piece of hardware. People will use these in those applications where they are specifically looking to suppress the amount of detectable hardware on the door. You're going to use a knife pole or an edge pole with center hung pivots and roller latches is where you'll see this used primarily. The Accurate line is certainly a nice quality piece of equipment. Weighs about 0.34 pound, and this is what the 26D satin chrome finish looks like. Okay, it is definitely, the body's not magnetic at all. That pull, however, is marginally magnetic, and I can't account for that other than the possibility that this is a different base material. I'm not familiar with any type of brass or bronze that picks up any sort of magnetic properties when it's been plated or, you know, machined or worked. Only stainless steel does that. So my little magnet here helps me understand what things are made of, and I would be tempted to say that part is not absolutely brass or bronze based material. Some dimensional properties, let's go over it now. 4 1/4, they say. 1 inch wide, very typical. The thickness of the item, about 1/4 inch, just heavy on that, maybe 5/16. There is some extended description information down below, which we're going to take a look at. They have included 2 packages of screws here. I don't know why the shorter ones are here. I mean, I'm really tempted to say they simply don't belong with this hardware, and I only showed it because it came with it. But these are probably a number 5 slotted brass wood screws. So be mindful when you're installing these screws, pre-drill quite accordingly. Those are slotted. That's a hallmark of high-end hardware manufacturers. If you looked at a catalog from 120 years ago, you're going to see slotted screws. It's an inconvenience for some people to have a slotted screw, but the bottom line is Accurate is a company that caters and manufactures hardware that is used in both the most modern of applications with motor-driven, you know, motor latch retraction, motorized exit devices, all the way to Harman-style hinges, a hinge that was patented at some point in the 19th century. So they're dealing with quite traditional hardware requirements as well as ultra-modern as well. But this is going to have some slotted screws, and the magnet test, that tells us be really careful. See, that does bear a little bit of magnetism to it. Be mindful. You have to qualify it as a soft base material. Be sure to pre-drill that hole properly. If it's a softwood, you can generally go about 75% of the diameter of the root, or maybe 80%. If it's a hardwood, you're going to want the size that you drill to be about 85% of the root diameter of the screw. I'd put a caliper on that root diameter. I would then use a wire size drill bit so that I got as close to accurate as possible. And then, of course, a very well-fitting slotted screwdriver is what I would be using on that screw head. All right, let's switch to the screen view where we can take a look at the supporting information. This here is the item that we are looking at, the FE158-1 26D. That's naturally going to be made in lots of finishes. FE158-1. Satin chrome. They can do a 3/4 inch wide as well. We have a satin brass listed here as well. Let's get back to the item we're working on, and we'll get to the catalog and look at other finishes. Solid brass edge pole with a sleek minimalist look, and that's what people are indeed after when they go with a knife edge, sort of concealed pole. Dimensions: satin chrome with exposed screws, available in multiple finishes, made in the United States, Connecticut, in fact. Great for closet doors, concealed or hidden doors, and cabinets alike. Easy to install. Custom sizes available, and what they mean by that is if you want to change 4 1/4 to 12-inch for some reason, they can oblige that. We've done custom sizes in this material. And why you would do a custom size is because, well, you've got a 6'8" or a 7-foot door. Well, if you have 9-foot doors, you're going to want the hardware to be correspondingly proportional to the overall size. Not only because it's taller, but because the door is going to require more hardware to actually physically work the door. Okay. Product brochure link is here. That is broken for some reason. Okay, so we have that broken link repaired. And here's the cut sheet, FE158 knife edge pole. They can do those in 1-inch wide and 3/4 inch wide. I have to say 1 inch is absolutely by far the most common. Why you might want 3/4 inches if you just simply have a thinner door would be a reason. I can't think of a particular reason to have one over the other, except that door thickness, and it's just more perhaps a subjective option. You know, the 3/4 inch is probably going to have a smaller knife pull itself. If it was a smaller door, if their doors were petite, a bank of 2070 doors, you know, and you had 4 of them together all pair and set matched, I would probably opt for a smaller item, but for sure 1 inch is the standard width. Now prepping for this would be super easy. Literally, it's a hinge. It's just a weird hinge. It's a hinge with an unusual height and a greater back set, and I would literally mortise it with my router as if I was doing a hinge. Then I would square my corners. What I like to do is to put my caliper on the item and make any fine tuning to my machining, but nonetheless, let's do that now actually. We're looking at 1 inch wide and 4 1/4 tall. When I put my caliper on the thickness, they say it's 0.312. My caliper tells me 0.301, and their catalog says 5/16 thick. The width, my caliper tells me 0.098. In terms of my overall width, my caliper doesn't go that far because I didn't spend the extra money to get the longer caliper. Mine only goes to about 4 inch. But my tape measure is, you know, for what I can tell, it's going to be 4 1/4. Okay. So a real easy preparation. It's just a template. Pretend like you're doing a hinge, and it would work out really well for you in that regard. Okay, so now back to the item that we're looking at here. There's a link here to the manufacturer's page that you can pull up and review not only all of the Accurate hardware products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to their current and prior catalogs and other encyclopedic documents that are here, such as offset pivots, hanging doors with the laws of physics. That's always nice to be able to look at someone who has produced technical data so that you can study it and better understand how hardware and the way in which you would like to use it is impacted by the physical properties of the hardware itself. So documents like this are always very valuable. Let's wrap up this video on camera. So back to the mortising. Again, I would just take my, well, I wouldn't be able to use my hinge template, but I would create a template and I would nail it to the edge of the door and I would just route my piece very simply. I would square out my corners, set my depth, and it would be really, really in good shape. Obviously, this is a non-handed piece of hardware. Doesn't matter. You have countersinks on both sides. If you notice that this doesn't work smoothly after you've installed it, you've probably over-tightened the screws. But this piece of hardware, as I pinch this between my fingers, is not susceptible to that sort of problem where it doesn't operate when you've over-tightened the screws like other manufacturers do. There's no doubt that this design has taken into account and worked around it. I can pinch this and apply a lot of force to it, but I can't get that to constrain the action. The problem with that is you're going to scratch your knife edge pull if you have it crimped down too much, so Accurate's done a great job of this engineering on this. Speaking of great job at engineering, Accurate is a can-do type of company. They have a can-do attitude. They have done hardware for the richest of rich. They have put hardware into the White House. I believe the Oval Office itself. There is not a incredibly... There is no shortage of the names of homes that Accurate has supplied material to that are of the most famous of individuals. And just in the last year, social media mogul has certainly received hardware from Accurate. A California senator, I won't tell you which one, at their house in California. So you have a confluence of can-do attitude. Absolute. Every single time you talk to them, we can do that. Of all the crazy things I've asked them to make, I think there was only one time where it was like, we can't make it that way. We have to make it some other way. But I needed it made that way because these were mortise locks that were in the Federal Reserve Bank in somewhere in the United States. They had doors made of incredibly thick steel. Yale discontinued their mortise lock, their 314, 315 series, the 310 series. Those function holes were very particular, and Accurate couldn't make me more mortise locks. They had to come up with something else, but we were able to work around that. But every other time they've said they can do it. An interesting time. The most memorable is when I was providing an outrageous quantity of hardware to a international airport in the Middle East. Access to the air traffic control tower, they needed 2 mortise locks, exterior and vestibule, that had a dual custody situation. Think of a renter key and a guard key if you go to the safe deposit box. You needed to have one key in and turned before the other key can go in and turn and open up that door. It wasn't exterior access. It was literally getting into the area where the air traffic controllers sat and did their work. Those locks were obscenely expensive. Several thousands of dollars my cost on those locks. They were a very unusual lock when you saw it, but they worked perfectly. Perfectly. So talk about can do. They'll do it. It's going to cost you. And I don't mean that in a negative or derogatory sense. When you're paying for engineering, it's going to cost you money. But I find that when Accurate does a custom solution, they're very reasonable with what they charge to come up with stuff. Whether it's, I sold a guy a Baldwin lock set, but he needed the trim extended for like a 7-inch thick door. Well, Baldwin won't do it. Accurate, can I send you the Baldwin trim and have you extend it? Absolutely, send that over. And it was, not a big deal. Extended cylinders, things of that nature. So when I say can-do attitude, they're not the only company that does this type of hardware with a can-do attitude, but they would be the poster child for can-do attitude. And they're just a great group of folks. Every time I talk to them, it seems like they're inviting me to come tour the plant, and someday I'm going to do that. Anyway, if you have any questions on the FE158 in either a 1-inch or a 3/4-inch size, the other finishes they can do all of the finishes, almost. Your brasses, your bronze, your nickels, your satin, your polished, your oil rub, generally. Sprayed finishes, probably powder-coated finishes. It's a multi-generation affair over at Accurate, and I would very much encourage you to review their catalog. They're not the company that you're going to use on a daily basis, but there will be instances when only they are going to be able to really help. And they fill that void very well. Any questions on this or any other Accurate product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.